like to personally congratulate her right now for her great leadership, along with the leadership of subcommittee. Now, so far here today, I'm going to introduce the legislators that are seated at the dais. The first person you just heard from is Delegate Cheryl Glenn. She is a delegate from the 43rd Legislative District, 45th Legislative District, and of course, chairman of the Legislative Black Caucus. Next to her is Delegate Charles Sidnor. Delegate Sidnor is on the House Judiciary Committee, and he is a proud graduate of the Baltimore Polytechnic High School. And then further down, you see Senator Barbara Robinson. Senator Robinson has ascended to the Senate recently, and she's running for her seat, and she represents it's the 40th district, right? The 40th district, Senator Barbara Robinson. And then next to Delegate Robinson is a man who needs no introduction. Unless he doesn't have his Kofi on, then you don't know who the hell he is. But he's a friend of mine. He first entered the legislature in 1982 as well, and he's now a member of the Maryland Senate from the 41st District, Senator Nathaniel Oakes. And then we have one of our youngsters, but he doesn't appear in any committee hearings or any of the formal sessions in the state legislature as a youngster, because he is so in tune with what's going on in Annapolis, as well as very informed on just about every issue, and he's not afraid to tell you his opinion, and that is Delegate Antonio Hayes. And finally, the old man of the group. He's the treasurer of the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus. He's a proud member of, Adrian told me to say this, of Adrian Jones's district, Delegate Benjamin Brooks. And since Delegate Jones has not arrived, we're going to skip down to item number 4 with a review of the Legislative Black Caucus priorities. And, okay. We'll wait a second for Delegate Gibson to be seated. Delegate Angela Gibson is a new member of the Maryland House of Delegates. She represents the 41st District. And Delegate Gibson, thank you. As you came in, you may have seen a chart on an easel that pointed out the priorities that we're dealing with right now. This is not to say these are all the priorities that the Legislative Black Caucus is considering, but these are the priorities that are really hot right now, and things that we have ad hoc subcommittees working on. And to present those is the chairman of the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus, Delegate Cheryl Glenn.
Thank you so much, Kurt. And before I begin, I just want to take a moment and recognize a few other dignitaries who are in the room with us this evening. We have representing Congressman Dutch Ruppersberger, Mr. George Pleasant Jones, and representing our new senator, Chris Van Hollen, we have Charles Connor. Charles Will. And hi, we have joining us our Congressman John Sarbanes, 3rd Congressional District. Okay. We also have some elected members of the Baltimore City Central Committee. See, I don't forget Central Committee. That's where I started. Why don't you stand, please, those members of the Central Committee? We have the chairman, Mr. Sherrod Barnes from the 43rd District. We have Arlene Fisher from the 40th District. We have Joyce Smith from the 41st District. Any others? Oh, Sharon McCullough from my district, 45th District. We also have joining us representing the Baltimore City Council, Councilman Leon Pinkett. And we have a few others representing the Baltimore City. Oh, okay. We have representing the state's attorney, Valda Rick. Okay. And Dewana Starrett, representing the CEO of the Baltimore City Public School System. And I see joining us another new delegate from the 41st District, Delegate Bilal Ali. So thank you very much. We'll move on into the priority agenda, and hopefully all of you picked it up. This is the agenda from our priority agenda from 2017. I want you all to understand the Black Caucus works tirelessly. We have a fantastic executive committee representing the entire state of Maryland, and we have great membership participation from all of our senators and delegates. So we're very blessed to have a strong, organized legislative Black Caucus. No one can do this work alone. And over the interim, we work diligently so that when we go to session, we are prepared. And so that's what we did last year. We met and we developed our agenda. We met with the Senate President, Mike Miller. We met with Speaker Bush, Mike Bush, and we met with the governor. So we rolled out our agenda to everybody. And on the opening day of session, we started with a press conference where we rolled out our priority agenda. So no one could say that they weren't aware of what we expected to achieve in the session. The first item on the agenda is the HBCU's lawsuit. You all know that this is our top priority, and it was such an important priority for us that we actually developed a subcommittee to handle everything regarding the HBCU's lawsuit. In the House, Delegate Sidnor was appointed to chair that subcommittee, and in the Senate, Senator Joan Carter Conway was appointed to chair the committee. So I'm going to bring Delegate Sidnor back up to the podium so that he can just bring you oh, you want to do it from there? Okay, sure. Yes, thank you. So he's going to just give us an update on where we are with the lawsuit.
Again, good evening. Really, to be honest, the lawsuit, which was filed some years ago, it went into a remediation, or had a remediation hearing. It's in federal court this past winter. I believe they were after weeks of testimony. And let me back up a little bit. So the state of Maryland was sued because for a variety of reasons. It was for the lack of funding for our historically Black colleges and universities here in the state of Maryland, and it was sued for its duplication of programs that were at some of the HBCUs. They were then duplicated at some of our traditionally white institutions at a detriment to the programs at our HBCUs. When the suit was filed, the federal judge, while she dismissed the part of the case that dealt with the funding, what she did keep in place was and found that by all means the state was discriminating against our schools by means of its duplication of the programs. One of the programs that was mentioned in the case was the Morgan's business program, which was duplicated out at Towson State University. So the phase that happened, like I said, this past winter was looking at how the state could work with the plaintiffs in coming up with a remedy. The plaintiffs, they introduced what they felt was what they felt should be adequate remedies. The state proffered theirs, and honestly, at this point, we're all waiting on the judge to see what the judge can do. What the Black Caucus has been doing since this is in court, and really we have no ability to intervene in this particular court case. We've been in conversations with the plaintiffs, just kind of seeing where things were. We've spoken with the Attorney General's office to see how they were proceeding and making certain that they were aware that we would like to have this case settled and settled and come up with some sort of a fair solution. So moving away from the particular lawsuit, one of the things that we did do in trying to support our historically black colleges and universities, we also began reaching out to some local companies, because some of the things that we saw happening with our HBCUs were some lacks of opportunity with a lot of the companies that we had here in Maryland. So we began reaching out. We had held a meeting, I believe it was last month, with Under Armour, and we're reaching out with a few other companies, just trying to ensure that that those companies are going to be there to offer certain opportunities to students coming out of the schools, and in addition, trying to make certain that those companies can support our schools where they can. So I'll leave it there. Is that good?
Thank you so much. Oh, yes, it's working now. This is working. I also wanted to share this morning on WOLB, Senator Larry Young informed me that he and Coach met with Governor Hogan last week. And Governor Hogan, the question was asked of Governor Hogan, are you intending to appeal the decision from the court when it's rendered on the HBCUs? And the governor said that that is not something that he would entertain, but that would be left up to the Attorney General. The Attorney General of the state of Maryland is Brian Fosh. And let me just say that we will make it crystal clear to our Attorney General that we absolutely will not accept him appealing the decision. He has to face election just like we do. And we all know that this is whatever the court renders in terms of its decision, they are rendering because they have a legitimate reason based on past history of a lack of equity funding for our HBCUs. Everything is political. And so that is why we must be a strong, organized Black Caucus. I want to recognize Senator Nathaniel McFadden, who just joined us, our President Pro Tem, and we're blessed to have him in the 45th Legislative District. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next agenda item, the next priority, and I'm going to skip medical cannabis for a minute. But you know what? I have a couple of people here who wanted to just bring greetings to you. We have our former delegate, Johnny Ochevsky, who's a candidate for Baltimore County Executive. Johnny, where are you? He just left? Is he out? Okay. Johnny O, come on down. Johnny was a delegate in the House of Delegates, and we actually served on the same committee, the House Economic Matters Committee, and now he's running for Baltimore County Executive. So come on up and join us, and you can have a few minutes just to bring greetings. You're very welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here for such an important conversation. As you know, you are all so well represented across the Baltimore region by so many wonderful, passionate advocates, and I've been pleased and honored to have worked alongside so many of these individuals up here fighting for these important issues over the years, and I'm just really excited about the prospect of continuing the fight for fair housing and transportation and supporting our educational institutions across Baltimore and Baltimore County. Baltimore City and the region deserves a partner who's going to be collaborative and a friend. And you have my word to my friends new and old that as executive you will have a partner in the executive office in the years ahead, as we've always collaborated. So thank you for the opportunity. This is a wonderful opportunity to collaborate, and I really appreciate the chance to say hi. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Congressman John Sarbanes, come on up and bring us some greetings. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you all. I'll be very, very brief as well. I just want to thank the caucus for its work in Annapolis on behalf of the city and the county of Baltimore area. We need that representation more now than we ever have. As you know, we are fighting as hard as we can at the federal level. Our congressional delegation, with champions like Elijah Cummings, of course, and here in the city, Dutch Ruppersberger as well, we're fighting on a whole set of priorities, but we understand that right now, with the person we have in the White House, what happens on the front line in the states, in municipalities, in terms of advancing an important and robust agenda that focuses on the quality of life of all of our constituents, is absolutely critical. So I want to thank the caucus for what it's doing. And I just want to say this as well. Obviously, the consent decree, the Department of Justice consent decree is going to be getting a lot of attention in terms of how Baltimore moves forward. I believe, and I was talking with Congressman Cummings about this last week, that in many ways Baltimore has the potential to be a model of a whole new way of building relations between the community, the police department, law enforcement, and so forth. We had hoped that the Justice Department was going to be a full partner in that effort. Unfortunately, with Jeff Sessions, we see that that's not going to happen. But I bet that with the efforts of all the people in this room, we're going to put forward some ideas, proposals, and recommendations where your federal delegation can then go to the mat in Washington and try to get the resources to support what can be a model here in Baltimore City. So thank you for your attention to that issue today, as well as to the other issues that you're going to address. Thank you all very much.
Also here, I see that Don Fry, the chairman of the Greater Baltimore Committee, is in the house. Don, please stand up. Always great to have you here. Always great to have the money guys here. And although the Baltimore City Police Commissioner is not here, he did send one of his very best. Colonel, I guess you're a colonel now, Darrell, is it? Deputy Commissioner. Deputy Commissioner and former captain and head of the Northeast Police District, which is right across the street. I hope raise this guy, Deputy Commissioner Darrell D'Souza. Well, everybody knows Melvin. Okay, and my man, Chief Melvin Russell. Yeah. Now, we'll revert to the order that we had because Delegate Adrienne Jones has arrived, and she is the Speaker Pro Tem for the Maryland House of Delegates. She has been involved with one of the most important topics that faces Baltimore City, other than the attempt to reduce violence in the city, and that is the education and funding education of our children and the funding of our public schools. So with that, you know, there was a report that a commission that was set up. They've been meeting. Adrienne Jones is on that commission, and at this time, I'd like to have the delegate from Baltimore County, Speaker Pro Tem of the Maryland House of Delegates, Adrienne Jones.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out to the Legislative Black Caucus Town Hall meeting. As was mentioned by Delegate Anderson, the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education, commonly referred to as the Kerwin Commission, the former Chancellor of the University System of Maryland serves as its chair, has been meeting since last September 2016. And if many of you recall that there was a commission that was called the Thornton Commission, we looked at funding. And we are now, and that was back in 2002, we're now in 2017. We need to look at spending, whether in terms of adequacy, or the commission is looking at what other countries have been doing in this area in terms of funding. We also were getting at every meeting that we had about 10 meetings. We get public input at the end. Anyone can give comments. But more importantly for you, we've been doing a series of public hearings, and the one for the Baltimore area will take place October 12th at Polytechnic, and I'll have some flyers I'll leave at the front desk so someone can get them there. And we encourage you to come to the public hearing. The information on the meeting dates of the commission is on the Maryland General Assembly website. Now, and I'm going to put another plug in. This is like my little pet peeve. During session, we have groups that come out, and there's some groups that come out regarding education. They'll come out and there'll probably be butts in, and which is good, and usually it's on a Monday night. But we need to hear from the community, and these legislators up here need to hear from you that in terms of who they represent the whole time, actually the whole year. And you might say, well, how am I going to do that? If you go on the website, you can go back and look at the hearings that we had from the past. You can go back and see what's going to be taking place. You can still get input. I encourage you to come out to the public hearing, but during Annapolis, don't just think that coming down as in terms of a group on the bus, that's it. We like to hear from you all the time, because there may be some bills that are coming up during the session that it would be great to hear from you, from individuals, and nothing against organizations, but for us, we like to hear from our individual constituent. That means a great deal to us. So if you could do that, that would be extremely helpful in terms of our work of the commission. And all of this is like, again, on the website. And if you are insomniacs and you want to look and see what has happened before 3 o'clock in the morning, you'll go on the website and pull up a hearing that, by the subject matter, that would be of interest to you. But the main thing, you are important to us. Your feedback is important. Come out to the public hearing, and let's get your input as we're going forward in the 21st century. Is not only is this commission, the Kerwin Commission, has been meeting, but another commission, 21st Century School Commission, also has been meeting since last year, and that's looking at more efficient way to pay for schools. So both of them, again, they're all on the website, and you are welcome to come to the meetings in person if your time allows you, but if not, there are avenues for you to still get that input. And again, I encourage you to come out to the public hearing for the Baltimore Area Polytechnic on October 12th, 6:30 to 8:30. Thank you.
As you know, the Maryland General Assembly is a citizen legislature. Virtually every person who has been elected to the General Assembly has another life outside of it where they work. And so work is over, and we've had some more of our legislators join us. First, let me introduce the Vice Chairman of the Baltimore City Delegation, Delegate Keith Haynes from District 44A. And the Financial Secretary of the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus. She is also a member of the House Judiciary Committee and has worked hard on several legislative Black Caucus issues. Delegate Pam Queen. And from the 40th District in Baltimore City, also serving on the House Judiciary Committee, and unknown to probably many people, this delegate has been in the forefront of many of the major reforms that have happened with regard to policing in the state of Maryland, including, not limited to though, but the most significant one that you'd probably know about is police body cameras. And he was the sponsor of the bill for 2 years prior to the bill actually being adopted in the state as well as in the city, and that's Delegate Frank Conaway. And then the last person who probably needs no introduction, there's only one African American who chairs a committee in the state Senate. There's only one woman who chairs a committee in the state Senate. That happens to be the same person. She is the senator from the 43rd Legislative District, one of the strongest voices in Annapolis, not only for our district, but for our people, and that's Senator Joan Carter Conway. Excuse me. I didn't see Darrell walk in. Normally when Darrell walks in, he fills the room, and I missed him, but it's one of the most pleasant surprises for us all. Delegate Barnes from Prince George's County has been one of the people who's been like the glue that holds the caucus together. Generally in the past, the caucus has been just Baltimore City, Prince George's County, but he's been the person who's made sure that the legislators who are from Charles County and from Montgomery County as well as Eastern Shore have a voice in what's going on and actively participate in the Black Caucus issue. So I'm proud to announce that Delegate Darrell Barnes is here as well, first Vice Chair of the caucus. Now, next on the agenda, we're going to discuss something that's extremely important, especially with this current situation in Baltimore City, and has been mentioned earlier, and that is the Department of Justice, the Baltimore City Police, and the Baltimore City consent decree that was entered into several weeks ago. As you know, the consent decree came up as a result of the mayor of Baltimore City asking the Justice Department to look into some of the practices and patterns and practices that had existed in Baltimore City that may have led to some of the unfortunate incidents that have occurred in the city. Not just practices amongst or by police officers, but shortcomings in some of the equipment, some of the ways that the officers are trained. There's a myriad of things. And I don't think anybody is trying to blame any one source for the problems in Baltimore, but I think everyone agreed that there needed to be change, there needed to be improvement, and so the Department of Justice came in, and over a year and a half, Deputy Commissioner, about a year and a half, looked into the practices of the police department, the deficiencies in terms of some of the things that the department needs, and came up with a report. That report was reviewed by the Baltimore City Law Department and eventually agreed upon by the three parties, those parties being the Department of Justice, the Baltimore City Police, and the Baltimore City government, the mayor of Baltimore. Mayor Catherine Pugh took over just after the report had been issued and was the person who worked hard to make sure that the agreement came as quickly as possible so we could implement some of those changes. Before any of the changes can be, well, actually, many of the changes have been implemented that the report included, but there are still many areas that have to be monitored. And part of that Department of Justice report included the request and the requirement, actually, of the appointment of a monitor. That monitor would be someone agreed upon by the mayor, the police department, Baltimore City, and Gene Ryan. That was a joke, sorry. It wasn't a joke, right? But apparently the mayor and the police department and the Department of Justice have come up with who they thought would be the appropriate monitor for the situation. I think there were several dozen applications submitted. It was narrowed down to 6, then down to 2, and Judge Braden, what's his name? Bradar, Judge Bradar, will probably make the announcement, if he hasn't already, as to the hybrid group that will be doing the Justice Department monitoring as far as the consent decree is concerned. However, many of you were part of the process, the town hall meetings that they had to take a look at who the monitor would be. In fact, it was the charge of this decree that the citizens of the city of Baltimore have some say in who this monitor should be. And I do not think, based upon what I've seen so far, that the input of the Baltimore City folks who came to these hearings and gave their opinions, asked questions of the various groups, made recommendations, that their voice may not have been heard the way it should have been. And to that end, just this week we found out that the African American-led group was not even considered, even though that group had been recommended by the mayor and by many of the community groups that had taken part in the process. Senator Joan Carter Conway and I have been engaged in looking at this process to find out what legally can be done, whether or not there's something else that needs to be done in addition to the monitor being created, perhaps creating a separate group by the Legislative Black Caucus. And to that end, Senator Conway and I have talked with several members of law enforcement, several members of the groups that didn't make it, and we've asked former Maryland State Police Colonel and former Baltimore City Major Neil Franklin to be with us as well. But let me bring up Senator Conway with regard to that part of it. Senator Joan Carter Conway.
Good evening. I'm just going to because Kurt did an excellent job in setting the stage for the consent decree. And I do have, and we have invited, after I spoke with our illustrious chair of the caucus, to bring them in because we thought it was totally unfair for the system. In other words, it was already an established system for the consent decree. And like Kurt said, and I'm not going to be redundant, but I just wanted to single in on the fact that, number one, the mayor has a choice, and the mayor made that choice, and she selected the monitoring entity. However, unfortunately, the DOJ and the mayor selected somebody very differently. Now, the normal process would be, based on all the town hall meetings and all the input from our citizens in Baltimore City, would be for the judge to decide whether they're going to take the recommendation from the mayor or whether they're going to take the recommendation from the DOJ. But he opted to go, in my opinion, and only it's my opinion, and y'all know I have a whole lot of opinions, but at any rate, he opted to go outside of the process and make a determination that he was going to pick a totally different group. And I'm kind of angered and upset about the fact that he thought he could do that. You know, most judges have immunity, and he could possibly have, but he could be sued, but that could be 15 or 20 years from now. We know how long it took us to get to where we are. So as we discussed it on the radio and in terms of what exactly had to happen, and Mr. Franklin, you want to come because you can give them the specifics to exactly what happened, but it's my understanding that the group that the judge assembled, and in my opinion, he's contradicted out because this is the same group that's representing the HBCU cases, the historically black institutions, and this particular group is on the other side of that issue. So, you know, that raised my dander, number one. But I just think he went totally outside of the process, and Mr. Neil Franklin can basically give you the process, the procedure, and fill you in. And the other issue that really angered us, that they did not listen to any other citizens in Baltimore in terms of their input, and they just made that decision. Thank you. Mr. Franklin.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be brief, and before I get started, just want to say that the leader of our team, Dr. Tyrone Powers, would be here. He has to be out of town for a a very important personal issue. So I'm filling in for him. So some of the things that I say, I'm going to give you some direct quotes from Dr. Powers in response to this issue. And as I look around, I see that many of you were actually at some of these community meetings that we attended and had to, where we had to answer some questions. But let me give you a brief overview of the process. For those that don't know, I think most of you do know. After the DOJ investigation of Baltimore City, the Baltimore City Police Department, the city and DOJ entered into a consent decree. And as a result, and first of all, there's been, I think, about 22 such consent decrees across the nation in the prior years. And pretty much, if not all of these consent decrees were regarding either Black or Latino communities. And out of those 22, there's only been one African-American firm to act as the monitor regarding the consent decree, and I think that's extremely important. As far as the process itself, there were 26, I believe 26 applicants, teams who applied for this monitoring of the consent decree. And basically what that is, the consent decree is an agreement between the Department of Justice and the City of Baltimore regarding a number of issues that have been determined that need attention, reform, to be dealt with, within the police department and maybe some other areas of the city. The monitoring team is a team that's put in place to ensure that these things occur, that these reforms occur, and maybe even beyond that, to better the conditions, to improve the conditions here in Baltimore City between the citizens and the police department and how business is conducted. Basically dealing with the constitutional rights of our citizens and even more. So that's what it's about. The monitoring team is put in place to ensure that this happens over a period of time. And as a result of that, you need certain experts on these teams, because it goes into various areas. Involving the police department, involving training, data collection, constitutional issues, and more. Hiring of police applicants, and just so many other things that are outlined in the consent decree. So you need a broad swath of experts in many different areas. And all 26 teams, obviously they're going to do their diligence, do their research, and do their best to assemble the best possible teams. But a very important piece of this process, obviously, is the community. It's the community engagement. It's the community approval. And I want to, and this is what a lot of this is about, what I'm explaining to you, and I want to read something. For those of you who are familiar with the basic policing principles that have been around for a couple of centuries and they're relevant today, called the 9 basic Peelian principles. Let me read to you principle number 2. And our police departments and our police leaders go by these principles today, and I think you will very much agree with principle number 2. It says to recognize always that the power of the police to fulfill their functions and duties is dependent upon public approval of their existence, actions, and behavior, and on their ability to secure and maintain public respect. The public needs to be involved in the decision-making process all across the board, A through Z, especially when it comes down to the police department. So as the 26 applicants, there were 3, maybe 4, main entities in deciding who the team is going to be. Baltimore City, the Office of the Mayor, Department of Justice, the community, and then the judge does have some say. But it's mainly those 3, the community, the mayor's office, and the Department of Justice. So there's an interview process set up. Questions are sent out. And this was happening very quickly. So if your team didn't have its act together, you were going to fall by the wayside. The questions came out, we had to respond, answer those questions, and most of the questions actually came from the community. See, this was designed from the beginning in all the processes. The first one was at Coppin State University, where all 26 teams, they had representatives there, the community was there, there were a number of questions that were asked. But then in the refinement process, they then narrowed it down to 6 teams. Okay, and then additional interviews were conducted by the Department of Justice, the mayor's office, members of the Baltimore City Police Department, and others. And all along the way, the community was consistently sending in questions that we had to answer. Very detailed, very important questions related to community engagement. How are we going to interact with the community during this 4 to 5 year process? You know, how are we going to ensure that those who don't typically get heard in the community have an opportunity to be heard? And each team had to have that as part of their plan. So then, as Delegate Kurt Anderson said, it eventually got narrowed down to 4 teams. And then we had a community forum here at Morgan, and we had one at Baltimore City Community College. Again, where more detailed questions were asked, the communities involved, face-to-face meetings and interaction, and again, electronically additional questions were sent in. And so all along the way, the community is involved. And then we get down to the last couple of teams, and all along the way, we're hearing things about the judge and kind of like really wanting to influence the decision-making process. So throughout this entire process, with great input from the community, we ended up with 2 teams. That was Exenger and the Powers Consulting Group. And lo and behold, the judge decides that he wants to assemble his own team. So obviously Exenger is not chosen, Powers is not chosen. So it's kind of like a hybrid from Venable, which was one of the 4. And Venable is a law firm here in Baltimore City. They have offices across the nation. And members from Exenger. So what's the problem with this? The problem with this is, number one, the community got to see the plan from each team. It's a team plan where all the members give input into, regarding their areas of expertise as to how we should go about this process. It's a team effort. These applications were placed online so everyone, the community, could see them and then ask questions according to their individual plans. But now you're assembling a hybrid team. The synergy is completely different. The plan, really, whose plan are you using? Okay, it's not a plan that has been vetted by the community. So this is a problem. It's about the process. And at the beginning, I talked about those 22 consent decrees across the nation, only one African-American led firm ever getting one of these consent decrees to monitor. And here we have an opportunity, because there were many black-led owned firms applying who were qualified. So it's not really so much about the Powers Group, it's about another opportunity in a city like Baltimore where a number of these teams were developed and brought together by folks from the community here in Baltimore, who've grown up in Baltimore, who live here in Baltimore, but yet have the expertise that is necessary for this monitoring process. And it doesn't happen because the judge decides that he wants to do something different. This paternal nature that we as a community don't know what's good for ourselves. Hey, I'm just saying. And I'll end with this, because I do want to just say a couple of things, in the words of Dr. Tyrone Powers, since he couldn't be here. And so one of the things that Dr. Powers has said is that the group manufactured by the judge was not interviewed by the community, as were the original teams. Thus, there is no true community input engagement in the judge's creation. The community didn't get to see or endorse a plan, program, or budget proposed from the assembled group. Even if individuals from his group were pulled from various teams that were interviewed, public presentations were made by teams and not individuals. The public offered their preference based on team presentations and not individual solicitations. And final comment from him is, I truly believe that this is problematic and will be problematic, as it appears that the process was hijacked by the judge, vetted by DOJ. In my opinion, the judge's overreach with this construction of this piecemeal group muddies his role as an objective and final arbitrator in the monitoring process. The citizens will see past a few prominent African Americans added to a group in which they have no control. So again, this is about the process, this is about the community not having the final and appropriate input in deciding who that team is going to be. And again, there were a number of teams from the Baltimore community, black-owned, black-led teams that would have been very, very capable of fulfilling this role as the monitor for the consent decree. So thank you very much for listening.
And I'm very thankful for Major Franklin to be part of that group and also to give us an overview and in front of our congressional federal representative, because the judge involved is a federal judge in the state of Maryland who has to answer to the Fourth Circuit if in fact there is any area of redress we have legally. But the caucus will convene this issue. Hopefully we'll make it one of our top priority issues, because it just developed in the last week. It is so important to have a monitor in place. You know, everybody shook hands and they made an agreement, and hopefully folks will honor these agreements. But in every jurisdiction, they put a monitor there to make sure that when there's some discord with regard to how the agreement has not been followed, that the monitor is the one that tries to resolve these issues. A federal judge doesn't have that ability. He just can't spend the time. And so having the monitor listen to the folks who are being policed, listening to the police officers who are doing the jobs as well as their supervisors, is such an important part of this process that we can't let it go with it being not representative of the folks who live here in the city of Baltimore. Okay, I'm going to bring back up Chairman Cheryl Glenn. We're going to do the last couple of priorities, and then we've had everybody in the audience has been given cards for questions, and we're going to get to your questions as soon as we finish these priorities. I'm sorry, we've also been joined by Councilwoman Shannon Sneed. Where's Councilwoman Sneed? Thank you for coming. And Councilman Christopher Burnett. He's right next to Shannon. Okay. And from the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus Foundation, Jeremy Lawson. Jeremy?
Okay, we're going to go back to. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We have on the end Delegate Mary Washington from the 43rd Legislative District. We're going to go back, and please know that we're going to have questions and comments and so forth. You can use your cards if you don't want to come up to the mic or if we don't have time. But I want to go back to the priorities just briefly to finish our explanation as to what we were able to accomplish and what we have still left that we need to do. Vinnie DeMarco is here. We had as one of our priorities the prescription drug affordability initiative, which was sponsored by Healthcare for All. Vinnie, you want to take 2 minutes and just talk about that real quick? You can use the mic down there.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thrilled that you're my delegate, and we're very proud of you. Last year, you all passed the first law in the country preventing price gouging by generic and off-patent price prescription drug companies. I want to thank Senator Conway for being one of the leaders on that bill, and Senator Oaks, Delegate Hayes on the committee. You really made it happen, but the Black Caucus was critical. I can tell you that law takes effect October 1, and it will make prescription drugs more affordable for Marylanders, and there's a lawsuit against it. And their hearing was last Thursday. The Attorney General Brian Frost's office did a great job, and we think that law is going to go into effect, and that law will protect all of us. But I'm here to take a second to say we need your help to get the message out. We have a website, healthcareforall.com/hearmystory, where people can, in English and Spanish, let us know if prescription drug prices are hurting them and their families. And senators and delegates, we're going to be coming back to you for additional legislation to try to do something about brand name drugs. Hepatitis C is an example of the kind of drug which is hurting people. I saw a sign where my office is in Charles Village that 1 of every 13 African-American children has hepatitis C. The problem is that because the price of that drug is so high, only 20% of the people who would benefit from it can afford it and can get it. And that won't be affected by this drug. This law you just passed, it's a brand name drug. We're going to come back with you with legislation to deal with that. And if 100% of the people could afford it at a lower price, the drug company makes the same money and more people get it. So I'm going to hand you a document right now which has our website and something about this new law. And I want to again thank the Black Caucus and Delegate Cheryl Glenn for your leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vinny. The next priority under education, we had 2 priorities. One was the ban on the pre-K suspensions, and the second was return control of Baltimore City Public Schools system to Baltimore City government. Actually, that was something the mayor wanted to have the sole appointment authority, is how that should have read, the sole appointment authority of the school board members. And so we were able to pass the legislation to allow her to do that. In addition, I just want to remind everybody that we were finally able to pass a bill 2 sessions ago to allow 2 members from the public to be elected to the school board. But that won't happen until 2022, but at least we finally got our foot in the door with that issue. But I'm going to bring Delegate Mary Washington up. She sits on the Ways and Means Committee to talk, just give you a brief blurb about the ban on pre-K suspensions.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. I apologize. I was stuck in traffic, but it's great to see you all here. I serve on the Ways and Means Committee, and one of our priorities was ensuring that we can stop the school-to-prison pipeline in the early years by banning suspension of our young children at pre-K through 2nd grade. And it took a lot. It took a lot of advocacy. I'm so proud of my colleagues who were dedicated to ensuring that this happened. Again, it wasn't easy. There were lots of reasons why folks wanted to give flexibility, they said, to principals, give flexibilities to our schools. But as state legislators, we know that there's a time when we draw a line, and we draw a line with suspending our youngest children when we know that most of them need interventions from behavioral health. Some of them may not see well. Some of them are coming from trauma at home. And so our jobs as educators and as the state is to make sure that they stay in school. We know that every single day that they're out of school, that they're not there for learning. So I thank all the advocates that are in the room here. I support the leadership from our chairwoman and president, Cheryl Glenn, and we look forward to continuing to protect our children in our schools and getting more funding to ensure that our public schools are the best they can be. Thank you.
And let me just say, we have 2 committees in the General Assembly. We have the House Ways and Means Committee, and then we have the Senate Education, Health, and Environment Committee that's chaired by Senator Joan Carter Conway. So we know how important it is for our education bills and our education funding to go through that committee as well. I'm going to recognize a few other delegates that arrived. Delegate Terry Hill from Howard County. Oh, he already did? Oh, he already did? Oh, I'm sorry, Howard County and Baltimore County. I knew I was missing something. Thank you, Delegate Hill, and she's also Dr. Terry Hill. And we have joining us from Baltimore City Council, Councilman Robert Stokes from the 12th District. Before we move on into the last two items on the priority agenda. Yes, we introduced her. That's okay. That's all right. We have Ben Jealous here. Ben Jealous is the former director of the NAACP. He's a candidate for governor, and we told him that we would give him a few minutes to just introduce himself to the crowd.
Hello, Ben. 2 minutes. Good to see you.
Hi, how are you?
All right, good to see you.
You too.
Well, good evening. It is great to be here with you, and while so many are gathered for the parties of the CBC, I'm glad we are here for the hard and important work of the LBC. It's always good to be back in Morgan. Like many of us, my family has a multi-generational history here, starting with my great-great-aunts who were dorm mothers. And I'm glad to see the Caucus standing strong on the need to make sure that we have fair funding and support for our HBCUs. You know, these are times when our politics must be guided by love and courage. And I'm so proud of the leadership of our caucus that they have stood up against the bail lobby. They have stood up for the end of mass incarceration and for the full funding of our schools. Our governor is doing his best to take us backwards together, to shift money to our private schools, to revive the failed strategies of the war on drugs. And it's times like these that we need courageous leadership that is willing to stand up and pull us together and move us all forward together. That's why I'm proud to be running for governor. That's why I'm proud of the leadership of the caucus. And that's why I'm here tonight as a resident of this region and somebody who works in this city to hear what's on the minds of each of you. So thank you for having me. God bless.
Okay, going back to the priority agenda, Ben Jealous just talked about the bail reform issue. Everybody knows that that was a very controversial issue for us last session, and I'm very proud, too, of the work that we did on that issue. But I'm going to bring up, which one of you from Judiciary wants to talk about that? Okay. That committee was handled out of the Judiciary Committee, so I want that discussion to be led by representing the Judiciary Committee, Delegate Anderson.
Yeah, thank you very much. As many of you know, it was a rather contentious issue that we tried to resolve this past legislative session. For many years, we had noticed that people who were being incarcerated or who were being arrested were being incarcerated prior to trial, being held on bails, most of which they couldn't afford, bails that were set for some of the most minor infractions like driving while suspended, things that weren't necessarily life-threatening. And most of the people who remained in jail who could not make bail were people of color, poor people, and poor people around the state. There were many articles done by the Washington Post and the Baltimore Sun detailing how much of a problem this was, what the solutions ought to be. And there developed during the legislative session last year two schools of thought with regard to what ought to change. The first school of thought was developed by the Maryland judiciary. Its subcommittees on criminal justice met for several months and came up with recommendations that it made to the Maryland Court of Appeals Committee on that issue. And it came out with a decision as regard to what and how court commissioners and district court judges should do, what they should do in setting bail. And bottom line is that, and again, many of you know that one of the things they wanted the courts to consider was the seriousness of the crime as well as the danger of the person to the community before setting bails. If there's a situation where you thought a person ought to get a bail, but that person was not a danger to society, and the person was likely to show up for court, then that person ought to be released on their own recognizance. And that was the idea that the Court of Appeals put forth in a rule that currently exists that took effect on July 1st of this year. Prior to that rule taking effect, the head of the district court system, the judge, Morrissey, wrote a letter of opinion to his district court judges and commissioners to put into effect really the spirit of what the Maryland Court of Appeals rule would have been starting July 1st. That letter was sent out sometime in November, and it certainly took effect at least through January, February of this year and on. I mentioned that because that was when the legislative session was going on. There was another set of bills introduced, several sets of bills that were introduced during the session that would have somewhat sustained the existing condition, keeping in mind and keeping some of the wording of what the Court of Appeals had suggested, but also keeping in place a system that would not totally destroy the bail bond industry in the state of Maryland. And that is their words. They felt that the Court of Appeals rule would put many bondsmen out of work, and they developed language that they thought would be good for both sides. So during the legislative session, each member here of the Black Caucus, and in fact is I think our most well-attended caucus meetings in my memory in 20-some years, where virtually every member of the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus came to listen to both sides and made a decision as to what the caucus wanted to do. Because the bottom line was that folks in our community were being held without bail in some cases. In some cases, a $2,500 bail kept them from getting home, getting back to work, getting back to the kids, getting back to their jobs. People were losing jobs as a result of being held in jail when they really didn't need to be held. So the issue continues in the sense that the Court of Appeals rule took effect just this July 1st, and it's only been in effect for July, August, September, just about 2.5 months. The caucus's subcommittee on this issue will review the results from the district court commissioners as well as district court judges to make a determination as to whether or not the court rule that was implemented serves the community better than the rules or the bills that were proposed by the bail bond industry. It's an ongoing process, and we're going to have a hearing on that towards the end of November, and that would be a subcommittee of the caucus on the criminal justice issue. So that is continues to be a Maryland Legislative Black Caucus priority. Are we done with the priorities, by the way?
No.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, and the last agenda item on the priority list was the medical cannabis, and I say that for last because I just wanted to make sure that you have a complete understanding on this issue. This is a very important issue for us. Let me just say that it is conservatively estimated that the proceeds from medical marijuana in the next 10 years will outnumber those of the NFL. So this is a new oil industry in this in this country. This is a very, very rich industry, multi-billion-dollar industry. But even more importantly, this is medicine for people who need it, who have debilitating illnesses. And that is why it didn't start with Cheryl Glenn. It started almost 40 years ago. In fact, Senator Nathaniel Oakes was a sponsor of a bill to bring medical marijuana to the state of Maryland some years ago. But in 2013, Governor O'Malley allowed us to only pass a bill that dealt with the academic medical institutions. Governor O'Malley was not a proponent of medical marijuana, nor was his Secretary of the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, Joshua Sharfstein. So we wasted a year in 2013 with trying to see if the academic medical institutions were going to have an interest, which we knew they would not. So in 2014, we came back and we insisted on passing a bill to create what we should have operating now, and that's a program, a medical marijuana program. Our law that we got enacted into law, the bill, was very, very specific. In fact, we're told that we have one of the best legislative pieces on medical marijuana in the country. It is very, very specific in terms of you have to have a bona fide relationship with a doctor. You can't just say, I have a headache, give me some weed, okay? It's not recreational. This is medical marijuana. So, and we want this to be not your first resource, but your last resource. We know that medical marijuana has proven medicinal benefits, overwhelmingly proven, and no one has ever OD'd by marijuana, especially medical marijuana. So in 2014, we were finally able to get the bill passed. Now understand that in 2013, when the original bill was passed dealing with the academic medical institutions, the commission was established. That commission was a 16-member commission. Only one African American was appointed to it. Why were we not concerned? Because it was not developed to be a regulatory commission. There was no expectation that this commission would ultimately issue licenses at all. So in 2014, when the bill passed, and we had a choice to make. We couldn't deal with the commission and the legislation. This was a very tough fight. As I said, took us 40 years to get here. So we focused on getting the bill passed, and at the last minute, including children. Because originally, the bill went through the process saying that you had to be at least 18 years old in the state of Maryland to be able to access medical marijuana when it became available. But then, we were educated and convinced our children get sick. There were all kinds of exposés on that on Fox 45 and some other channels. So anyway, we moved forward. We got the bill passed. We thought we were on the right path finally with getting medical marijuana up and running in the state of Maryland. Now, this was 2014. We're in 2017 now. But then the commission decided arbitrarily, and it had nothing to do with this attorney general saying that they couldn't factor in race into the equation to issue the licenses. They didn't want to issue licenses and do it the right way to African Americans and other minorities. So they issued 15 licenses for growers. Finally, last year, 15 licenses for processors, and then the dispensaries came on board later. None were issued to African Americans. None. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And in addition to being amazing, unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. You heard about the DOJ situation. We have a 50-member strong legislative Black Caucus, and we collectively said that we are not going to let this happen in the state of Maryland because actually nationally there is less than 0.1% licenses owned by African Americans nationally, okay? But we said this is not 1950 in Mississippi. We're not going to do this. And so we had a bill that we worked collaboratively on last session for several reasons. It died at the last minute on sine die. I think everybody knows that. And no Cheryl Glenn, and nor was the Black Caucus. We haven't been very happy about that. Excuse me? Why It died in the House at the last minute. It died in the House. It passed the Senate. It died in the House. But, so where are we now? We have a commitment on paper from the presiding officers. And we had intended to try to deal with this during the interim, but there have been a series of things that has happened on a personal side with our membership that prevented us from being able to bring the entire caucus together. We've had some deaths, some illnesses, and so we said, okay, we're going to wait until the beginning of January, and we have a commitment from the President of the Senate, the Speaker of the House, in writing, that this will be priority legislation, and we're asking for it to be Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 1 to be passed when we return to session as emergency legislation and put on the desk of the governor in the very beginning of session. And we have a commitment that that's going to happen. So stay tuned. Next year's election year. So we're going to be very committed and very vigilant, and we will let everybody know what's going on. I'm on Larry Young's show once a week, every week, reporting on what's happening from the Legislative Black Caucus. And I do that on Mondays. So, and we do an article in the AFO. The AFO has been very generous to allow us to report in their newspaper once a week. So you will know. And you can also call us to find out what's going on. But I just want to make sure that we have your support and ensuring that we have the diversity. And let me just make one other point clear. We must have that diversity. We're talking about equity, and there's nothing wrong with that. But even aside from that piece, marijuana is still illegal according to the federal government. So what we did, because we understood that your insurance won't pay for medical marijuana when it is available. So we put into the legislation something called the Compassionate Use Fund that's going to allow people to be able to access medical marijuana who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it. We will not let this be a rich man's drug. So in order to have that in place, the legislation is needed. Everything is in this new bill that we will be filing and insisting on it being passed. And the leadership knows it. The leadership knows that we're not afraid to publicly challenge them. When it's right, it's right. When it's wrong, it's wrong. And I don't care whether you're a D or an R. And we're not going to let people play games with us on this. So I wanted to just bring that to your attention. And we have cards that have been, thank you so much. But I wanted to go down and allow our members. Okay. Delegate Anderson has worked out a system. So I'm going to defer to you.
Thank you very much. And as you can tell, Delegate Glenn is extremely passionate on that issue, not just in front of people, but in the back room as well. So thank you, Delegate Glenn. Okay, one of the most important things is for us, as we mentioned earlier, was to hear from you, hear from the folks who actually live in Maryland, have to go by the laws that we pass, and who have opinions about some of the problems that exist that maybe heretofore we had not, thank you, that we had not considered. So we've asked everyone to fill out a card, and as I acknowledge, as I read it, and we're going to answer as many of these as we can, probably all of these. And if we missed anybody, then we'll get you towards the end. We'll also reserve some time for each caucus member to maybe. We're going to do that? Yeah. Did you submit a card, Shorty? No. Oh, you want your own time? No. Okay. All right. All right. Okay.
Did you bring some ribs?
Yeah, we did. We already did that. You were late. Just kidding. All right, from our first question is from Akil Harris, and it says, the red line expansion on the subway system being rejected by Hogan, what about other infrastructure needs of Baltimore and okay, I can't read the last part, but I'll go to First Delegate Hayes on that question.
Testing. Oh, it actually worked. So one of the things, obviously, the governor has, pretty expansive authority when it comes to funding transportation projects. One of the things that we did in the legislature most recently is provide more transparency in how they fund the various transportation projects, creating a grading system throughout the state. Last year, and there's a couple of people here in the audience that I've already saw this evening, but one of the most notable people, Mr. Sam Jordan, is in the audience, have been really not letting go on the issue around the red light. Sam is there in the back for those who are interested in this issue. I know I saw you somewhere, Sam. But there's still a very active group of individuals and advocacy groups around Baltimore City that's advocating for transportation, which is one of the major needs that we have as a community to get in transportation. But for right now, there has been no will on behalf of the governor to fund any other major transportation systems other than the announcement today about roads.
Did any other caucus member want to respond to that? Okay. And that was, I'm sorry. Yeah, certainly. Delegate Bilal Ali.
Yeah. In addition to that, I think as citizens in Baltimore City that we have to really focus on and connect the dots in relationship to transportation and access to opportunities. You can't disconnect the two. And I think what didn't happen by the governor just arbitrarily cutting projects to Baltimore City, as a group, I think that has to be one of our top legislative agendas moving forward in this next session that's coming up. Among others, especially while I got the mic, the State Center project. We have to have some development in West Baltimore. Just this week, we had development in the Perkins homes. Michael Beatty, who's one of the richest developers in Baltimore City, and we know that he already done developed Harbor East. And what do you think gonna happen to those people when he developed that 8 blocks of Perkins Square? I mean, we either drunk as the wheel or we don't understand what's going on in the city. And I want, and I'm saying it publicly, we need to make the State Center a legislative priority. They didn't have no tips in it. Read the development. You had 12 communities that collaborated over a prolonged period of time. They were shovel ready. They did not get a $500 million worth of tips that Port Covenant got. So we need to do our research and just stop saying, well, what's good for Baltimore, and you taking all the money and giving it to rural areas. I mean, what about the people in Baltimore? We the laughing stock of the whole state, and we supposed to be the engine that drives the state. I mean, that nonsense hasn't stopped.
Okay, our next. Okay.
Just wanted to remind you that we have a public hearing on Saturday, September 30th, and Delegate Ali, we have included under the area for transportation that State Center project.
All
okay,
right.
so
I'm happy to hear
I'm
that.
expecting you to have the people there
They're
to
here
be able
now.
to make a
Developer Caroline Moore, stand up, Ms. Moore.
But no, Delegate Ali, at the public hearing, they will have the
they gonna be at the
opportunity
hearing.
to make a presentation
Okay.
to the Black Caucus.
Okay. We want something in West Baltimore too. You know.
Our next question is from Prudence L. Johnson. Prudence, where are you? Just raise your hand. There you are. She's in the back. How has this happened that the judge can dismantle this entire process, eliminating public input? I take it this is regarding the appointment of the monitor for the Department of Justice consent decree. All right, we'll give that to Senator Conway.
Well, did you hear any portion of Mr. Neal's statement? Okay, very good. So you kind of understand exactly the situation and where we are currently. Well, like I said, you could do one or two things. You could sue the judge because he operated outside of the procedure, but that could take years. So what Delegate Anderson and the Powers Group and Mr. Neil Franklin, we had decided that we need to at least explain to the public exactly what was going on, that they neglected any recommendations and they did all of this outside the process. So we're going to meet to find out if we can correct the situation. If it cannot be corrected, and just based on what's going on in Baltimore City, then the plan is that we need a monitor to monitor the monitor. Okay,
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I have the wolf guarding the chicken coop.
Any other caucus member wanted to respond to that? Okay, thanks. Delegate Conaway.
Thank you very much. I would just like to remind the public that you don't tell a judge what to do, basically. You might put it on paper, you might say it in public, but you watch the response and you'll find out that a lot of times the judges have the opinion that you do not tell them what to do. That's all I want to tell you. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for your comments. And look, that is exactly, this situation just occurred. We just found out about it Friday. Friday was the day that the judge indicated to the mayor and the police department that they wanted a particular hybrid group made up of two groups that didn't even get to the final, didn't get to the final table. We found out about it Friday, and this is an ongoing caucus issue. We're considering looking at asking the Fourth Circuit to issue injunctive relief. That's the thing that could be immediately done. But as far as the suit is concerned, that would take a long time. And we're looking into the exact nature of what we want to do and how we can, what we can do. Okay, our next question is from Janet Allen. Will the Black Caucus push for the development of the State Center project? It is in the true interest of West Baltimore.
Yeah, we're doing that. Yeah, we pushing that.
Okay, that was already answered, Janet, right? Okay. Another question from Janet Allen. Will the Black Caucus push to strengthen Baltimore's black middle-class communities by encouraging investment through the elimination of blight? And Delegate Haynes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And good evening, everyone. I think that answer in short form is yes, without a doubt. One of the things that we all know is that blight is a burden in our middle-income communities, our lower-income communities, and it's widespread throughout the city. One of the things that we have done, you may have heard about the core funding, I think it was 2 legislative sessions ago, where we had about $95 million and some additional funding as well, which was brought back to Baltimore for demolition into some of the areas communities that had a lot of vacant homes and et cetera. One of the things that we wanted to do to make sure that that funding didn't change from budget year, fiscal year to fiscal year, and sitting on the Appropriations Committee, we codified that, I think, over 4 years to ensure that Baltimore received that funding and that games wouldn't be played. So the thing that we have seen in some of our communities and some of the districts across the city is a process where that core funding has gone into deconstruct, tear down some of my more vacant properties. But let me tell you, the flip side of the coin is this: the issue is just not tearing down. The flip side of it is making sure that there's funding there to build back up. And I think that's incumbent upon each of us who serve on budget committees on the House side and the Senate side and the caucus as a whole to push for funding to rebuild our communities and our neighborhoods. Because every time you talk to an individual in the community, uptown, or on the west side or the east side, the big issue is, what are we doing in our communities? And if you start to eliminate the blight and rebuild our communities, then some of the problems that we're dealing with, from crime to opportunity to in a whole litany of other issues, I will truly believe will start to come down. The one thing, as I finish up, Mr. Chairman, is this, is that we also have to remember that Baltimore City, part of eliminating blight is good infrastructure and roads, okay? Baltimore City receives in a lump sum every fiscal year funding to take care of our own streets, okay? Now, I don't remember the dollar figure off the top of my head, but let me put it in this context. Out of 100% of transportation funding that goes back to the jurisdictions, I think Baltimore City at one time was receiving about 75% of that. Is that about right? That's about right. And so what we also have to do in looking at not only structural blight elimination is what we're doing in our communities to improve the infrastructure as well. So those are two things I would hope that the caucus will continue to push forward to.
And Delegate Ali had a comment.
Yes. In addition to that, not only the people that's in the middle, but we also got to talk about the people at the bottom. And we need to start a conversation about public housing in Baltimore. And we got all this money for demolition, and we know that at one time in public housing, anytime you demolish a public housing, you are mandated by HUD to replace it. We just been turned down. We done got a wrecking ball up here, and like the delegate said, we don't have no plan to build affordable housing. We got too many people that's been waiting for years for decent housing, and everybody should be affordable, decent housing in this city. And these are the type of conversations that we should have, because last I looked, we are supposed to be the Black Caucus, and most of the people that affect is black people.
Okay. Two more comments, Delegate Sidnor and then Delegate Conway.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to point out, I believe last session, the General Assembly had passed an enabling legislation for your counties and the city to land bank. So, I mean, one of the things that I know that we're interested in Baltimore County, some of the delegates, is making sure that because we're dealing with some of the same issues when you're talking about our communities within the Beltway. Some of the same issues that you all are dealing with in Baltimore City. So, I mean, I would urge you who live in Baltimore City to see where the mayor stands in land banking.
Okay. Delegate Conway.
Thank you. As I understand the situation from Legislative Services, when you have a property, it's a two-part situation. One part is who owns the house. The other part is who owns the land. So if you tear down the house, that you ride by and you can look in the window and see the sky. Somebody has to take the responsibility for the rental payment, and it might be 5 or 10 years worth of rent due on the property. As I understand it from legislative services, again, you can't just take the property from the property owner. You have to assume the responsibility of the back rent. Thank you. The ground rent.
Delegate.
Yeah, we'd like to recognize a gentleman in the audience who's been working for the black community for more than 30 years, ever since Delegate Oaks and I came into the legislature. He's the head of the he was the concept behind the Maryland Small Business Financing and Development Administration, Miss BIDFA. And we're proud and happy to see in our audience today Mr. Stanley Tucker. Stan? And I know you have a question up here, and I'm going to make sure that you get a response to that.
Delegate
Also,
Anderson.
Yes.
I wanted to say
something. Oh, I'm
something
sorry,
about
Delegate Senator
I
Robinson.
know, it just overlooked me.
Okay.
I wanted to mention something of the question about the blight. One of the things that I'm finding is that some of the houses that have been abandoned, maybe your grandmother lived there and she's gone, and the people, the generations after that, don't want to live there, and they're living out of town. So when you have a building there, and I can say that because one is next to a property that I own, the house itself is worth about $3,000. But the liens, the water bills, and all of these other things that's been added makes it at least, well, when we checked, it was over $100,000. So nobody is going to pay $100,000 for something that's only worth $3,000. So what we need to do is, what, in my opinion, is look at the laws that says that all of these other charges are added on to a building that nobody's going to live in. And like the delegate said, when you pass by a house and you can see the building, when you can see the sky, nobody is going to pay $100,000 for that. So look at the laws that says that all of this other additional expenses are added on, and find out these absent landlords.
Thank you very much. Stan, did you want to say something about that? Okay, all right. Also wanted to acknowledge a gentleman who has been involved with the black community for a long time as well. He served 25 years in prison, wrongfully convicted, and when he got out, he spent his every waking hour working on reentry issues, and that is Mr. Walter Lomax of Restorative Justice. Mr. Lomax.
He stepped out for a minute, Kirk.
He left already? Okay,
Yeah, he
thanks.
stepped out.
Okay. Next question is from Kristen Harbison. Kristen, raise your hand. Okay. I would like a moment to ask the caucus to support clear energy jobs initiatives, raising the RPS to 50% by 2030 with significant investment in job training for women and minority-owned business. See, it says right legibly on here. Okay, so it's big. Yeah. Okay, we have Delegate Terry Hill respond to that question. Delegate, you got me.
Boo-ba-da-boo. Sorry. Krista. For those who don't know, she's an advocate. She fights very hard to get things done in the state for the people of the state. So what is an RPS? It's Renewable Portfolio Standard. So essentially, when we talk about renewable energy, we've set a couple of tiers of what we categorize as renewable energy. The first tier is like solar, wind, and that kind of stuff. And the standard basically sets a goal of what we expect utilities to meet by a certain time. So the first law, I think, was put into place in 2004. We had a portfolio standard that said that by 2022, we expected 20% of Maryland's energy to come from renewable sources. 2 sessions ago, we passed a bill to raise the 20% by 2022 to 25% by 2020. The governor vetoed it, and then we overrode the veto. And the reason that was sort of an interesting veto on the governor's part is because for many years, there was a battle going on between the environmentalists and the energy and business community as to whether or not the goals could be met. And what we saw happening is that the energy companies were doing a much better job than they had anticipated. And so by the time we came back to say, can we renegotiate this deal and look for a higher standard sooner, they had decided it was good for business. So when we came back with the let's do more sooner, there was no opposition. So for the governor to veto that was just strange, okay? So as far as your question is concerned, certainly renewable energy has in many ways a disproportionate impact on our communities with respect to the health effects of non-renewable sources. So we tend to live a lot closer to where the lead is coming from and where the pollution is coming from and all of that stuff. So we will certainly, I think, as a caucus, look at anything that is going to help us to move more into green. And we know there are jobs with that. That's one of the reasons we supported the change that we saw. And we all hear about that debate on the national level. So yes, it's all about the jobs and it's all about our health.
Thank you very much. Did any other caucus member, Mr. Benjamin?
Yes, thanks. I'm
My name is
Delegate
Mr.
Brooks of Baltimore County. Yeah, if I could piggyback on what Delegate just said, you know, there's an economic component here. Those of us who were to invest in renewable sources like photovoltaic solar panels or geothermal energy reductions, like for instance, the ITC, that's the investment tax credit that the federal government was offering, was supposed to have sunset at the end of 2016. Well, it has been extended to 2022. So that means you can get a 30% credit, you know, towards your taxes on any investment into renewable sources, photovoltaic panels. You know, here again the geothermal, and in addition to that, if those of you who live in Baltimore County, the county government will give you a $5,000 credit toward your property taxes. Now, I think this is about 2 years out. If you can't exhaust all of that during that first year, then you can take it forward to the second year. And the state will give you a $1,000 credit, you know. So you're talking about, you know, if you invest $20,000 from the government, you're talking about $6,000 there, in addition to $5,000, that's $11,000, and the $1,000 you get from the state government, that's $12,000. So now that $20,000 investment is only costing you $8,000. So I think Stevie Wonder could see that. That's a good deal. So I encourage those of you who are who have the wherewithal to do that, please take advantage of it. Also, there are some companies that will install the panels for you at no cost. Be mindful that they're going to own your roof for about 20 years if you were to do that. So, okay.
Thank you. Did any other caucus member want to respond to that question?
I just wanted to piggyback because we're probably not going to have another energy question.
That's not true.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, what Delegate Brooks was talking about, the financial benefits, one of the concerns that we as a caucus and we as a General Assembly had was that we were seeing that people with means were the people who were being able to take advantage of having cleaner energy. So we passed legislation to allow for citizens to form cooperatives and purchase into green energy and solar panels, because we don't want to see that where the poor folk are, we've got all the traditional sources, and it's only in the well-to-do communities that we have solar panel and green energy.
And I just want to piggyback on that piggyback. Yeah, be mindful too that whomever owns the panels, they're the ones who get the investment tax credits. So be aware of that. Okay, thanks.
All right, for future reference, members of the caucus, we were trying to get to everybody's question, so there'll be no more piggybacking. Okay. Sloan, where's Sloan? Cohen? Whalen, okay. Again, oh, wait, I can see it now, okay. I would like to see the Black Caucus make State Center a priority, okay. We talked about that. Are you satisfied with that one, Sloan? Okay, thank you very much. The next question is from BB Verderay. BB, are you still here? Okay, thank you. We know that school systems with large numbers of African American students are among those with the biggest gaps in education funding, Prince George's, Baltimore County, Caroline, etc. The need is urgent. How can we work with the caucus to prioritize addressing those funding gaps in 2018? And you're saying we, meaning the ACLU of Maryland, or everybody? Okay. All right, and we'll have the chairman of the Education Committee in the Senate, as well as the president of the Senate, respond to that.
Well, right now, you know, BB, we consistently work on K-12, and we do a reallocation based on per pupil. So, you know, because of the consent decrees that have come down in education, we know that there are disparities, especially in the ethnic communities, the African American communities, and the poorer communities. But what is critically important, and we will consistently work our way through this, in 2018, you know, there's a Kerwin Commission out there. And in terms of the Kerwin Commission, is where the extra funding will come in. They'll take a look and make a determine and increase the per pupil allocation. So of course, you know, we're always in the room. I intend to be in the room fighting very hard for all of our students, but specifically for those communities who have those gaping disparities with our children. Additionally, the other issue is, and they can talk about it in terms of per pupil, because it's the Kerwin Commission. And although it's about money and per pupil allocation, there are a number of policies sometimes that come in with those dollars that hinder our jurisdictions from getting and moving forward the way we need to move forward. But I'm going to also defer to Education Senator Nathaniel McFadden, and you also have the good Vice Chair over there. Yeah, but Senator McFadden?
But anyway,
Budget and Tax.
just real quickly, what the mistake that was made with Thornton was they didn't take into account poverty.
That's right.
And this whole Kerwin piece, we have to be insistent that one of the major considerations is poverty, especially concentrated poverty, right, with respect to how much money comes back to the various jurisdictions. So that's a big one that we have to stay on top of.
Absolutely.
And go ahead. Your mic on?
Hello? Okay. As I mentioned before, I actually serve on the Kerwin Commission. I can assure you that is one of the areas that we're looking at. It's not just not a 21st century of Thornton. You know, that's why when I mentioned about the town hall meetings, it helps us when we see your faces in the place.
That's right.
So, and in answer to your question, Bert, if we can get as many people who are saying this is important, it helps us, it gets our back. So I can't, help that. I can't encourage that anymore. But it's not just a rehash of Thornton. We're looking at all aspects, how we can improve. We're hearing from people who do come to the committee meetings, but please come out October 12th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not wanting to be the subject of any Snapchat or Twitter or Facebook articles. The next question is from Shorty. I actually took your question from the bottom of the pile and moved it to the middle. Okay. Shorty's question is regarding mass incarceration and remedies to defend those people who are underclass and who are okay. Okay, come on to the mic and just express a little bit better than I can.
My question is to
you do need a mic.
my question is to the panelists. I'm an advocate for prisoners' rights. I've been advocating for prisoners' rights for the last 10 years. I've testified in Annapolis on various times. I've been incarcerated in Illinois and in Maryland. as a whistleblower, I've given this information to Mr. McFadden in 2010, before I got locked up in 2011.
Senator McFadden.
Yeah, Senator McFadden, I'm sorry. I came to Annapolis and spoke. The bottom line is, I'm asking about mass incarceration because most of y'all been in office. Y'all the Maryland Black Legislative Caucus, right? This y'all's names here from 2009, all right? So it shows you how I contacted y'all. Y'all shouldn't have never left me in jail. Number two is, y'all gotta do something about y'all tore down the statues, but if you're gonna tear down racism, you gotta go after your criminal justice system and your courts and your courts. You gotta go after them judges that Governor O'Malley put in place when he was in office, that are sitting in housing, that are sitting in criminal court, that are sitting in family court, because those are the things that are affecting us. If you look around this room, how many of y'all been to jail? You feel me? The people that have been in jail that these laws is affecting ain't in this room. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm gonna face with you, I'm gonna chat you, I'm gonna ride you until you do what gotta be done. You wanna stop this racism? Your job is to stop the racism. You need to put your checks and balances in effect. When the judges ain't doing the right thing, it's your job as a legislative branch of our government to check them judges and to check the judicial branches of our government. So do your job or lose it, because I'm gonna be on mine.
And to be perfectly honest with you, I think your question does deserve a response in terms of what the Legislative Black Caucus has been doing for the past 5 to 10 years. You mentioned Governor O'Malley when he was mayor of Baltimore City.
That's why we got the consent decree now, because he let this stop on Frisco and he incarcerated
Exactly.
150,000 people under your watch.
And almost half of those 150,000 people were arrested and released without even being booked or sent to court. And Delegate Jill Carter sponsored a bill which the caucus supported and we passed that said that those folks would have their records immediately expunged. We've also, well, Shorty, I'm just telling you some of the things. Okay. I think that the caucus response is appropriate. I mean, we can go back and forth outside, as we've been doing for the last 7 years.
Mr. Chairman, let me just sort of, if I can, address this very important issue. Because the legislation that actually passed was House Bill 10 years ago, which I was the sponsor of that legislation, which automatically expunged the records of about 750,000 individuals who got caught up in the mass incarceration at that time. What it also did was to provide relief for individuals who retroactively to apply to have their records expunged who were caught up into that without having to pay for their freedom of the fees, the exorbitant fees on expungement. And so let me move forward in the public safety area. That one of the things the chairman mentioned a little earlier was with bail reform. Right. And absolutely. So one of the pieces that was not articulated in his response at the time was that, because of the time factor, was that the caucus had the foresight to monitor the judicial system that you're talking about on the bail issue, because we required the judicial system to report back to us on the numbers of how many people are being caught up in the bail, released or not released, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, so that we have the hard fact numbers to move forward. We need to do so on the legislation. So it's a big issue, it's a complicated issue, but I just wanted to point out that there are things that the caucus is doing, and from a judiciary standpoint, well, let me finish. On a judiciary standpoint, those issues come before, the judiciary comes before the subcommittee, which I actually chair, public safety. And I would invite you to come down to testify or to speak with us personally on these issues so that we can address them when they're presenting and testifying in their hearings for their budget.
Shorty, come to the microphone so we can all hear you.
Your Judiciary Chairman, Bobby Zirkin.
No, that's Senate.
Senator.
That's
Senator Zirkin and Valario was at Ruth Chris Steakhouse in Laurel with the Bells bondsman.
Yeah, but we didn't pass their bill, did we?
But the bill didn't pass. But Shorty, you're absolutely right in terms of the direction that they're going in. And that bill will be back this legislative session.
That's right.
No, and I believe that.
Senator McFadden.
Just real quickly, October 1, the Justice Reinvestment
That's
Act
right,
that we
right.
put a tremendous amount of work in takes effect, and slowly but surely, Shorty, we're going to get there. And we don't have time to go into all of the things with that mass incarceration we had to address, spending more money to incarcerate people than trying to elevate them and put that money into education and other things. But, and it's also going to be sections in there where we take care of larger swaths of the community. Again, we don't have the time to talk about it. October 1st. It takes effect. You'll be hearing and reading about it.
Okay. So, Shorty, you going to ask a question and leave? Okay.
He said I'm waiting for you. I'll be there, Shorty.
I'm driving the gray Mercedes. Okay. Where's Daryl? Yeah, okay, thank you, man. And I'm glad you guys, can enjoy this moment. These issues are very serious. And, we worked very hard on them, as you can tell from the responses of the caucus members. And every once in a while, and look, we really appreciate people like Mr. Dwayne Davis, Shorty, who just left, keeping our feet to the fire. That is part of what Baltimore is. That's part of what we do. We're not afraid of it. We live, we ask for it. We want y'all to tell us where we're falling down. So.
He's in for a challenge because you fought Muhammad Ali, so.
Okay, all right.
He's sitting on the wrong car.
All right, this question is from Daryl D'Souza. Is it true that you and Ben Jealous are brothers? Well, be honestly, I know we're both fairly good-looking fellas, but I actually knew Ben's mom back when she lived here in Baltimore. My father was the dean of men here at Morgan State University, and I actually helped raise this young man to be the big boy that he is today. So, Daryl, it's crazy you asked that question, but yeah, we're not related, but we're friends. How come minority business enterprises are not getting more work at the casinos, Maryland Live, and Horseshoe? Any caucus member want to take that? Senator Robinson.
I was a delegate for 10 years, so he just won't let that go, right? One of the things that we've been fighting is that not only are minority businesses not getting the fair share with the casinos, but also with the school construction. So what has happened is that the Governor's Office of Minority Affairs, that name now has been changed with my bill this year, Small Minority and Women Business Affairs. At that, in that office, you can find set-asides. You can also find it's just like the Federal Reserve. There are contracts. There are programs, is what I'm looking for, the word I'm looking for. There are programs that minority businesses and women-owned businesses did not know were available. And you can now find that information at Small Minority and Women Business Affairs. Not only that, once a year, I have, and Neil Franklin was one of the speakers last year, MBE, WBE legislative night in Annapolis. And that's the time when you meet with your legislators and you meet with the people from various offices, various state offices, video, casino, construction, Wayne Frazier's group, etc., and you find your answers there. So what I would say is that not only contact the office at the governor's office, but come to that meeting and be able to ask those questions or get those questions asked from your legislators. So you're absolutely right. MBEs, WBEs, we're not getting the amount of contracts that we need or that we deserve or that we are qualified for, not only from video, but as I said, from other agencies as well, or from other sources as well. So we need to be really, really vocal about that.
Joshua, yes, sir. Go ahead. And could you make it brief because we're kind of out of time.
Hi, Josh.
I want to say to Mr. Chair, Madam President, congratulations to the caucus for what you're doing. I know as a black man in Baltimore City, being in business 30-some years, it's not easy. What you're up against is not easy because good old boy system, I don't care how they slice it, it's still existing. And you got to put your gloves on and your tennis shoes because you got to run and fight. So the bottom line is, I'll be real brief. I have several proposals that we have actually written, and they're not major proposals for Horseshoe and Casino. We have been fortunate to get at least 3 jobs at Horseshoe. Casino is out of the question. We have engineered and designed stuff that other competitors, they have given them that didn't even fit and wouldn't even work. But yet, people out there getting work, and it's not like us. So I would definitely try to get your card. And if there's any set aside, I want it.
What I'd like for you to do, actually, there is another program that I'm working on, another bill, and I don't want to talk what it is right now, but what I'd like for you to do is to see me afterwards and call my office because I'd like to sit down and discuss that with you.
And we're adjourning in a few minutes, so you can talk to her. I mean, she'll be available. You don't.
Sounds
give
good.
me 5 minutes.
No
We got one last question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Our last question is going to tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, there's still about 30 or 40, but we've contracted Morgan to allow us to have this facility from 6 to 8 p.m. We did start right on time, and we're a little bit past 8, but I wanted to give Mr. Stanley Tucker the opportunity for the last question, and it's an important one. Access to capital is essential for the growth and development of minority businesses. How do we protect and increase capital that has been designated for minority businesses? And I think Senator Robinson wanted to respond.
That's right. With you as my backup.
Okay.
Stanley and I have talked about this many times. And one of the bills that we worked on, that there's a study group, House Bill 264, that study group is looking at the opportunities and challenges of minority businesses in Maryland. They were concentrating on access to capital and also the way that black franchisees are treated nationally. I mean, we were just at the White House last Monday to discuss this because it's a national problem, access to capital and black franchisees. Elijah Cummings scheduled a meeting for us to be over there. We met with Maxine Waters because, as I said, it's national. So one of the things that this study group has been meeting for the past year. And at the end of December, they will come up with recommendations on, and specifically focusing on access to capital and the way minority businesses are treated. And that information will go to the governor, to the House, to Senator Miller, and also to me, to look at what that data actually says, and we will put in legislation to address that issue. And I just want you to know that, I just wanted to say that we do get it, and that's the reason that we've been working on it for the past year.
And 30 seconds for Delegate Ali.
Yes, Mr. Tucker, as you are aware, last legislative session, the 41st delegation, I sponsored the bill on the House side that was passed, and Senator Oaks sponsored the bill on the Senate side, that we were directing money to minority and women business, because we understand that the only way that we're going to get out of this situation is through an economic pathway. And we applaud you and your organization for what you have been able to do to assist minority business. Is that 30 seconds?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know that we recognize certain individuals in the audience, and we just want to make sure that each and every one of you know that of the cards that you gave, we're going to write responses and mail them to the addresses on the cards. But every single one of you here tonight was important for us to hear from. We're happy that you came, and please keep in touch. This Maryland Legislative Black Caucus is working for you.
Delegate Anderson.
Delegate Anderson.
Yes.
Can we post that message on the website that everyone can see that?
Or the Facebook page.
Yes, sir. Okay. And the public hearing is on September the 30th. Madam President, why don't you come up here and just and send us out in fashion.
Right there. Free parking.
Where? Again, thank you to everybody for coming. I just want to reiterate, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., we will have the public hearing, and so we will allow everybody the opportunity to make a presentation to us on whatever issue of concern that you have. There is free parking. This is a free event, but there's free parking at the garage that's 1 block away from the building on Calvert Street. It's the Calvert Street parking lot. It's a garage, and the garage. I'm sorry. The event is being held in the joint hearing room in Annapolis. That's in the Legislative Services Building. So we will be there from 9 to 5. I would encourage you to please join us at that event, because that's going to be a lot more time, obviously. But just to reiterate what Delegate Anderson said, as long as you gave us your contact information, I guarantee you that you will get a response for your question that you, and we did these cards on purpose so that we would have them available at every single public hearing, meeting, whatever that we have, so that you can contact us and we can contact you. But I just want to thank you again for coming. I hope the information that you have gained tonight has been informative and valuable, and we continue as the Black Caucus to work for you. Thank you so much.